I will let Jessica introduce herself.
This is so much fun, and it's so great to see so many friends joining and familiar faces and getting to know new faces. So thank you for joining. Those of you who know me know that my primary background is as an outcomes researcher. My entire career has been in workplace well-being, and my focus for my research has been on outcomes. I began my research career doing return on investment studies, in particular, trying to help leaders understand that there was a cost benefit to investing in employee well-being. But that shifted after a while. I got bored with that question because I felt like we answered it. The answer is yes, you can get a return if you do it right. And then we started to focus on, well, what is the doing it right? What are the best practices? And what I quickly learned as we got into that question, along with other colleagues that I was collaborating with, was that culture is extremely important. And that some of the best practices that we could point to had nothing to do with programs. It was what we were wrapping around the programs that mattered. So this study is extremely exciting to me because even though we've been dabbling around this culture of health, batting that around for years, as Philip mentioned in a LinkedIn post, I think it was yesterday, Philip, you said, we were talking about, how do you measure this? It's so messy. It's so complicated to try to figure out what we mean by culture of health. And here we go with a solution, Joel. This is easier. This is easier. So my personal passions are yoga, reading, global travel, hiking, spiritual well-being, and anything that brings all those things together. So that's a little bit about me. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited that you're here. And if those of you who are friends of Jessica want to say hi, Jessica, so I know who Jessica's friends are, you can do that in the chat box. Okay, I'm Joel Bennett. I'm president of Owls. We have a lot of owls around here. We give a hoot. We came from a background of research and made the transition after receiving $6 million in NIH and other funding, designing workplace wellness interventions. We made the transition to be our own organization, consulting and delivering programs. Because of our programs being tested in clinical trials, we, unbeknownst to us, have been recognized. Surgeon General recognized us, SAMHSA recognized us. I personally have received some recognition awards that I'm grateful for. I've written a lot. My personal passions are my grandkids, the beach, any beach. If you're at a beach, text me, email me. I want to come say hi, okay? I'm also interested in timelessness, which is related to Jessica's interest, and mysticism, anything that has to do with that. So if I could take the kids to the beach and be into timeless and mystical stuff, I am like there. I'm like there. I don't need any chocolate. Now, diving in. So I'm going to share this quote from Jessica's book. Individual level behavior change efforts are likely to be more effective when physical environments, social relational norms, and policy support the desired health promoting behaviors. So Jessica, I know we're about to get into this. Do you want to make any further comment? I know this is saying what you just said about the importance of culture, but there's more to it than that.
Well, there is more to it than that. And, a lot of when I first started to delve into the culture research, we don't have a lot of ways to measure this. There's no real consensus. There are quite a few different approaches to measurement that are out there, some more complex than others. But what we know is no matter how you measure it, it makes pretty much everything that you do at the workplace more effective when what you're wrapping around your programmatic efforts and your interventions is aligned culturally. And that could be through leadership, it could be through policy, it could be through norms. So all of these things have to do with culture. What we're talking about with the study is work climate, which is different. And we're going to get into the difference between those two.
Yeah, I'm going to flip this quote around a little bit and say that the focus on individual level behavior change is somewhat misplaced. It's like we've been focused too much on that. And that's what this whole work with team awareness is about. And so people focus on that to the detriment of ignoring culture. And so what I said long ago was, so let's build a program that improves those other things. Let's build a program that improves the environment, improves social relationship norms and policies, as well as individual health behaviors. Perhaps it might be better to focus on those norms first. And by doing that, not only do we help individuals, we also help, guess what? The culture. So it takes what, and to Jessica's credit, it's a levels of influence, multi-level model. You cannot change culture without multiple levels. You can't just focus on individuals and expect the culture to change, right? So both Julie Dostal and Jennifer Farringer here, who've been working with me for 2 years on approach, all right? That the culture itself of the United States and the current science is very much programmatic in orientation. Let's do this program without doing the capacity building and the work that you really need to do to build those relationships. So yeah, I'll go into this, but first I want to say this is a grounded model. It's grounded in years of clinical studies that have a theoretical basis. So what you're seeing here are published articles, intervention studies in peer-reviewed journals. I'm not going to go through all of these, but and this doesn't even include the one that we're talking about today in occupational science. So we wanted to make sure that the theory had a basis in science and that the intervention that came out of this, the approach that came out of it. The reason I'm showing you this is that they're all different. Some of the same, but there are a lot of differences here, meaning that it's not just one program, it's an approach that can take different faces. It has different ways of manifesting. And the work that Jennifer and Julie are doing is called Team Awareness Workplace Wellness New York, because it's for New York State. So here you can see some versions of this. You know, the original Team Awareness was for municipal employees. We did a 4-year study with TGI Fridays. We didn't do a study with the National Guard. They actually adapted this and called it Team Readiness, not Team Awareness. NICA IBEW, Small Business Wellness, which is what we're going to be talking about today, and so on and so forth, including a recent veteran wellness adaptation. So the idea is that we take some core ideas, but then we adapt it to the culture, right? So you have to begin with the idea. You can't import a program into a culture. If you're going to change the culture, you have to talk to the culture, listen to the culture, and empower the culture to adapt the program. That's the key. That's the key. And it takes time and effort. It's not a quick fix. So was there a question about that, or should I go more into this study?
Just a brief one. I don't want you to go down into too much of a rabbit hole on this, Joel, but when you say adapting to the culture, some people might be, oh, you're just adapting the language, right? it's much broader than that, isn't it? I mean, aren't you actually saying, well, no, this piece isn't going to work here because it's not relevant. You know, we have to change the format of it, the structure of it, how we engage people. Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by adaptation so that people can get a little bit of better idea of that?
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
No rabbit holes, Joel.
Yeah, so yeah, you said something that's important. You said this module or this piece won't work here, so let's not use it. But it could also be they're not ready for it, so let's not use it. That's very important, because it's not just whether it'll work, it's whether they're willing, ready, and able. Because what happens with science is like, this is the formula, and this is how you're supposed to use it. So there are a lot of evidence-based programs out there that are, you have to adhere to fidelity, and you have to do it this way, and this will be the way it will be done forever. Okay? Adaptation is not that. Right? First and foremost.
I love that. I love that. That maybe it means phasing it. Maybe it means withholding a piece, but not forgetting about it. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, because what do we know about readiness to change?
Yeah.
It makes no sense. And most research-based models in the social field keep on utilizing the medical pharmaceutical model as, and this agent has to be delivered. The delivery mechanism in social settings is as important as the content, because culture, connection trumps information all the time. Connection trumps information 100 times in any cultural approach. So you're adapting to connection. You're making people feel comfortable. You're making people feel like it's theirs, right? Or I shouldn't say making, because, you can lead a horse to water, right? Does that answer that question?
It does. Thanks so much, Joel. That's really helpful.
Yeah, again, no rabbit holes. So you had asked, what do we actually find in this study? And people want to know, what are the outcomes? And similar to previous studies, I do want to say that in those previous research studies, we tend to have the same findings based on the original funding. So the original funding was from the National Institute of Drug Abuse and SAMHSA, because there was an interest in reducing employee substance misuse risk. So that was the target, but that's not the only target. And so in the previous studies, we have found reductions in drinking frequency, reductions in problem drinking, reductions in job-related drinking, like coming to the work with a hangover. But we also have ancillary findings that support that: increased help seeking, increased EAP utilization, and other types of well-being outcomes. In this particular study, we found effects across the board in a lot of these things that you see here on the right, including reductions in health symptoms, perceived well-being, positive unwinding, which is a really cool, Dr. Camille Patterson introduced us to that idea that after work, how do you unwind from stress? And we found that that's a risk factor for people who might have addictive tendencies, right? How many of you unwind after work with a bar of dark chocolate versus, a beer or whatever it might be? So those are some of the outcomes, including some stress. So the study showed that those outcomes were based on people attending the team-based training compared to an individual training, that those outcomes were to a good extent mediated by changes in the work climate. So that's a synopsis of what we found.
So what do you mean by mediated?
So the arrows here basically say it. In order to change those health outcomes, for many people, you first have to change their perceptions that this is a good place to work.
So we can't get to the outcomes without going through workplace climate. Did you do a path analysis where you were looking to see if there were direct effects between the team-based wellness and health outcomes?
Yeah, it's not
a direct arrow as well.
Yeah, there is too. It's not a hard mediation. There's called partial mediation and full mediation.
Okay.
It depends. What the point of this study was to show that wellness climate plays an important role. That's it. It plays an important role. I don't think every employee needs to see that, but the study showed that by focusing on that, you improve both. That's the point. So that those effects can last. We did a 6-month follow-up, and the 6-month follow-up showed that it was more likely to hold if you had those improvements in climate.
Right, right. And so if I'm remembering correctly, the comparison was an individual focused program, individual focused. And then was there a control group as well that you compared?
Yeah, there was a control group as well. That's right.
And so my interpretation of this, of what you just said, is that if we could influence wellness work climate, which we were able to do with team-based, but not with the individual-based, it provided more lift to the health outcomes. I just lost my pen.
Your lift. That's
and I lost my pen.
That's great. That is an example, a concrete example of transcendence right there. You lift and it just goes. Okay. For those of you wondering what spirituality looks in the workplace, we just saw it.
There we go. There we go. All right, moving on.
So yes, I love it. It is lift. It's that what we want to do is help employees not only help with their own health and well-being, but with their sense that, hey, this is a healthy workplace. Because if you change the environment, it's going to have greater sustainability. So that's what we mean by mediation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that helps. I know it's a little nerdy, but the arrows, I hope, help here.
Yep, that helped.
Okay, any others? Should I move along?
Oh yeah, I think the next one sort of we were anticipating the complexity here.
Yeah, so I have this, you know what? Let me show you this slide in a animation. By everybody, this is going to be maybe the nerdiest part of this call. So those of you who want to go grab a bar of chocolate or throw your pen up in the air, now is a good time. Okay. Step one, right? In this statistical model, we know that the team training improved the wellness climate. That's what Jessica was saying. Right after the training and 6 months later, within a month and then 6 months later. Step one. Step two, we know that changing the wellness climate had an impact on health outcomes. So the path is 1 to 2, but we also, to Jessica's point, the team training directly improved health outcomes as well. The individual wellness program, which we can get into, only had an effect on health outcomes, and they were weaker effects.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the nerdiest part, I hope, of the conversation. It's very simple, but it's profound, because what it says is we can change the climate and ostensibly the culture of an organization. This is a randomized clinical trial. Workplaces were assigned to receive either the team wellness program, the individual wellness program, or a control group. So it's a controlled study. Random assignment is the golden standard for determining whether or not a program is effective. So Jessica, should I stop there or?
No, I think let's keep going, because I think what we need to get into is, well, so what actually happens in this team-based training? What is team awareness? So let's actually get into what people were exposed to.
Yeah, thank you.
And Philip has his hand raised.
Oh, Philip, yes, please. We're here for you, buddy.
All right, so I'm wondering if you can operationalize some of these things, and maybe that's where you're headed, which is, like, I understand the concept of climate, but when you're improving the climate, like what are those endpoints? What does that look like?
Yeah. So Jessica, should I jump there or do this first, or just answer his question, talk about the measure now, or?
Well, let's ask Philip. Philip, we're heading there. Do you want us to address that now? Would that make more sense to organize it that way for you, rather than getting into the intervention before we talk about, well, what was this work climate? We can go there first.
No, I can wait. I'm excited. I'll just on. I'm just
Delayed
trying to wrap my
gratification.
brain around these things.
I mean, I don't know.
If,
Yeah.
if you have to jump to something else, we can get to it now.
We'll be there very quickly.
We'll be there very soon.
All right.
Very
Getting there.
soon.
Stay the course.
Unless, of course, Kelly asks a question or anybody else. Okay. So what is team awareness? What actually happens? Well, the first thing is, what is the core message of the training? We have a motto. The team awareness motto is usually no one person is responsible for the problems we face. More often, we are together responsible for the solution. That kind of conveys in a nutshell already that we're not talking about the individual. We're talking about all of us. We're talking about us together, and we're talking about us being responsible. There's a key word, and proactive. That's the core motto. And everyone who comes to the training, they get a card that has that motto on it in the original program. Then, and I apologize, I will annotate this. The program in its original version is made up of 6 modules, okay? And each module is interactive, group exercises, and is semi-skilled or skilled-based delivery. So there's a module on meaning and relevance, which can also be called the ripple effect, which is we're all part of something. My work affects you, our work affects each other, our workplace affects the community. This is important. And what is it like to work here? Team ownership of policy and benefits. So this is where we talk about benefits and policy as it relates to that. So instead of seeing your mental health benefits and EAP in a disembodied context, here's your material, we talk about it, we play a board game, and people get to know about what actually is available to them. Then we have responding to tolerance. So what we found, and you'll see this, is that very often, and this is a key piece to this work, coworkers, people in the work environment, people in the work group know if a coworker is going through a hard time, if a coworker is struggling, if a coworker has problems at home, if a coworker has addiction problems, but they are never given skills to be able to address it. And there's stigma. And what we found most importantly, and this is the core of this whole program, people don't talk about it. They put it under the rug. They neutralize it. It's none of our business. It's none of our business what's happening there. And I have dozens of stories to share. My favorite story is a fire department who called me up and found that they had to let go of somebody because of cocaine. And when they did the interviews, they found that everybody knew about this for a very long time, but nobody said anything. And it's that lack of psychological safety, tolerant, ignore, minimize, rationalize, enable, basically what we call organizational codependence, is at the heart of many of these problems, if not the problem. It's not that people don't have the problem. It's that everybody shuts up about it. And there are many ways that manifests, many, many ways. So in this module, we show them scenarios and how would you respond and how would you do this? It's really enjoyable and exciting work, by the way. It's fun. We have our stress and resilience program, which I just delivered this morning. It's about resilience and thriving, not just stress management. Then we teach communication skills because, hey, what if you do have a coworker that you want to talk to about it? How do you go about talking to them? And then we have our final module, which is nudge, which is a peer referral, where we role play case studies. This is also called our ambassador training, but it's for anybody. This is not just for peer support specialists. Anybody can be a nudger. And I was raised Jewish, so I'm not talking about that kind of nudge. Nudge. There's a difference between being a nudge and a nudge. Okay, can we agree to that? There's also a difference between being a schmendrick and a schlemiel, but that's beyond the scope of this presentation.
I'm going to take your word for it, Joel. Tell us more about nudge. I think the next slide gets into that because I was curious about
this
version of it.
Yeah, very quickly. So when people come to the training, they get these 7 prevention principles. And you can see the last one, support and encourage others to get needed help. And what we found in our research, again, this is grounded in research, that one of the most robust predictors, and I'll be talking about this tomorrow night in a presentation, of employee mental health and substance use problems was psychological withdrawal at work. It later came to be known in some cases as presenteeism or other things. So we found that those people who are more likely to be problem drinkers and have mental health problems are withdrawn. They're not engaged. They're apart. They're distant. So what we learned was we had to find a way to give their coworkers tools for say, hey, come here, let's talk. Hey, I want to know what's going on with you, in a way that was not confrontational, in a way that was gradual, incremental, and was sensitive to what we know from motivational interviewing, right? So this is a form of motivational interview training for the common everyday person. And I will tell you, every time we did this, and we do this, we often hear comments from spouses, right? They get the training for work, but they say, I need to use this on my husband. So it usually is that way. I never hear it the other way from the husband to the wife. I don't know what that's about, but that, again, is another conversation. For those of you who are husbands and want to chime in here. Anyway, so what this training does is it builds up to the nudge. You cannot, for scientific fidelity reasons, do nudge by itself, because it's like you don't have the basis for talking about it. So Ed is notice what's going on. So give them signs and symptoms, or however they might think something's might be going on. They may not have clear signs and symptoms. It could be their intuition. You understand if you have a role to play. So it's really what possible role? Is it me? Is it my supervisor? Is it going and playing, going bowling, going for a walk? You know, where do I fit into this picture? D, decide what you should do, if anything. So it's a choice. If you do decide, use the guidelines that you learned earlier in our modules on policy, in our modules on benefits, on our modules on listening. And then E, encourage, which is really compassion. The E piece is, how do you empathize and show compassion? So that's what the nudge model is. And I hope that answers the question. And it's we use role play with groups of 3 people, a nudger, a nudgee, and an observer. And nudgee is not, those nudger and nudgee words, I don't think they're in the Webster's dictionary. They're my words, nudger and nudgee.
They need a little TM on them. So Joel, that's super helpful. Can we skip over the next slide, which is quite complicated, but I feel like you've covered the core content there, unless you would disagree, and get into Philip's question, because this is what you changed. Let's talk about that.
Right. So this model on the left, it says that in order to address that neutralization, that codependence, that enabling, we have to focus on group processes. And part of focusing on group processes is what are employees' perceptions of the work environment. And so there's this rich literature. In fact, where we did the original research was at Texas Christian University, where the original research on workplace climate came out of. And so what do we mean by organizational wellness climate? It's a measurable way to capture employees' perceptions of protective factors, strengths in the work environment, and what that means, perceptions of positive coworker relationships, positive policies, positive social norms that support optimizing wellness and well-being. So we published a paper in 2019, and the link is here, and I'm going to show you the items from that. So Philip, this is the scale. This is the measure. It's what we call an omnibus brief measure of organizational wellness climate. We use the word omnibus because it captures diverse elements in a simplest scale we can come up with. So I'll share with, and these are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, and you can see them here. And I'll give you a very quick rundown of them. And they all hang together in terms of statistical cohesiveness. So even when they differ, people at work are truthful about their personal viewpoints or feelings. People in my work group have vitality, differences are appreciated, coworkers can be counted on, you're able to keep secrets without being afraid other people are going to find about it. We have access to wellness. We actually make it a priority. We put safety here because in this study, everybody who participated were in safety-sensitive organizations, including hotel, restaurant. And the last one, which is close to my heart, is overall time, schedules, and workflow are well managed and under control. So these captured enough diverse different dimensions, and this is what we improved overall. So Philip, that answers your question. This is the actual items. This is available at no cost. It's from the Journal of Occupational and Environmental Medicine. It's in the public domain. We have other items, but this is what we actually assessed in this study that we found was the simplest way to get at it.
You know, Joel, I had a thought about this. So the other night I was lying awake, well, I wasn't lying awake, I was actually dreaming about this measurement tool. Nerd alert. You dream about measurement tools. I'm thinking about the multi-level design you used here, which we haven't talked about, but it's so important for this work. And FYI, if you're reading a paper that talks about an individual intervention, but they're also including some measures related to group things that happen and exist at a group level. Multi-level is the correct approach to that. I think I'm right in saying that, Joel. A lot of papers don't do that. They try to get around it by using interaction factors, perhaps interaction terms, but multi-level approach is the way to do these kinds of studies. And, you know, as I was thinking about the interpretation of this is when you look at all of this, it's like people are saying at the individual level and at the team level, I feel authenticity. I feel positive outlook. I feel respect for differences. I feel connection and psychological safety and appreciation. But there's also we feel. And I think that that's an extremely important piece of this because it's not just about changing one individual person. The real magic happens when we get the group to understand and perceive things about the way things are around here. Would you say that that's, I mean, this is a 2 a.m. hopping awake reflection, but respond to that a little bit. Like,
oh yeah,
how do we react to this?
I want to say that it is a lot easier to change. There's a complexity here, and I'll stop sharing the screen for just a minute so we can talk about it. It's a lot easier to change the individual's perception of us than it is to change our perceptions of us. This is why I have a hard time with all this talk about wellness culture, because so much of the wellness culture discussion is we have to have a healthy culture here, but it's all very abstract and very macro and very systemic. What we're talking about here is changing my perceptions of how we're doing, but also changing our perceptions of how we are doing. It's easier to do the first, which is what we did in this study. But over time, if you have more people having that, then it becomes an us. And over time, the more groups of us that do this, the more culture you have, you see? So instead of this being a top-down culture change, it's happening at the micro level, one-to-one, because of my relationship with Kelly, with Julie, with Patrick, even with Philip. It's like, we're together on this. And that's where we fall down short. We don't use approaches that are gathering the group together. And that's the first point. And there's a lot of points in that's the first point. The second point is, it's one thing to get people to agree. It's one thing to get an individual to agree. It's the other thing to get the whole group to agree on the level of us. There will always be diversity. It's a mythic mistake to think wellness culture is this ubiquitous, we're all happy, we're all aligned, and off into the rainbow and sunset we go. There will always be variation. So the issue here is, what's the sufficient level you need of some commonality? And that's more complex, you follow? But the point I'm making is that the program gets us started. That's what we found. The program gets you started down that road. And to my knowledge, I've never seen another program do that. Again, I'm biased because most of the programs that are out there aren't focused on the climate. They're not focused on how I feel about us. And they don't bring us together to talk about it. So the program, the team awareness program, brings us together to talk about it. And I'm going to say a third thing. And this is hard, and it's not what you asked. For some people, that's very threatening. Our culture does not lend itself to, let's all go through this journey of health and well-being together. It's none of your business what I do, especially if I have a problem with an addiction. You see? So it's more dicey, but that's what the program was designed to address, just what I just talked about.
I love that, you're giving people language, you're giving them permission, you're giving them tools and skills to say, let's engage with each other. And I think we are at a point, because of what we have lived through the last 3 years, just so many things, cultures globally. I feel like there's a readiness now for us to say, okay, like we're ready now to figure out how to help each other. We're ready now to accept these skills. I feel like there's a cultural awareness, a cultural readiness to begin to understand that my thriving, my flourishing can't be at its highest potential if there are people around me suffering. And, neuroscience tells us that mirror neurons, when we see people suffering, we are wired to respond with compassion, and it hurts us a little bit when we see other people hurting. And so we want to help. We're wired to help. And I love that this particular intervention meets that innate human need to do that. I mean, you're the psychologist. Am I all wet on this? I mean,
no, that's exactly what it's, I mean, you can ask, so Patrick and Julie are trainers in the program. Kelly does some training with some of this work. There are people here who've been training it. So I think I'm seeing, hi, Steve. I've been seeing you in a long time. I don't know how much you've been using it, but yeah, that's what it's for us. Can we get together here and talk about this? That's what it is. It's really that simple. It's like, instead of, here's a PowerPoint slide on the signs and symptoms of depression that you should know about, and you should know about it very well because you may have to use this someday. That's very different than this approach, which is soft. It's not, and the other thing I'll say, we stigmatize kumbaya in our culture. People will say, oh, it sounds like it's a bunch of kumbaya. And what I'm showing you here, no, it actually has impact on a person's well-being. Right?
Yeah. So how do we so unpack this, take it to the next step? We've got about 12 minutes left. And I want to make sure that we're answering any questions. Can we talk a little bit about how can then people take what was learned in this particular study to some practical takeaways about how we can apply these findings to whatever we're doing with health and well-being in our environments?
Well, the first thing is the curriculum is available and we have it linked so you could take a look at it in the paper. So the practical thing are the tools, right? And we have those tools and we're happy to share those tools and adapt those tools. But I think I put this list together because I think it's a mindset. But first, Phil, did we answer your question? I want to make sure we answered your question the way you were intending it to be answered, or Philip?
Yeah, Philip, did you get your work climate?
You did answer my climate question, and the sense I'm getting is, you know, that it's less, as you say, about like the culture, but you can start in pockets and you can grow the climate through the clusters of people who are willing to create psychological safety and support each other. And that sort of shared experience is creating some protective factors that are showing some of the outcomes.
Exactly. Yeah. And not only
summarized, Philip.
Yeah. Philip, not only can you do that, I don't know any other way to systematically do it. I don't know any other way to do it systematically other than what you just said.
Well, it makes sense because it's the coalition of the willing. And you have to start there, and that seems to be the hard place because we try to go really big. And I also hear from people that they're like, the interest in wellness has trailed off. And I think those are people who see that nobody wants the transactional wellness stuff that doesn't work. And so they're not quite sure how to make it happen any other way.
Well, now you can tell them how.
Yeah, I mean, this is an approach. You could take this particular approach. I'm seeing approaches here, and now integrate them into, create restructuring of how you are currently intervening, right? You can take some of these approaches and say, well, how could we bring some of these behaviors and skill sets and mindsets and scaffolding into your intervention du jour? Would you agree with that, Joel?
Yeah, and it plays off of what Philip just said. He kind of implied that there are people who are losing interest in wellness.
Right.
And that's scary because it suggests that they don't know what wellness really is. They think it's the program again. So I'm segueing, I'm making the connection between Philip's comment and your comment, because instead of focusing on the program, you're focusing on the people, right?
Yeah. And their relationships with one another, you know, as a group, as a team. Yeah, so let's move on to our final bit here, Joel, just to kind of bring all of this together. And I'd love to make sure we save some time for other questions that might come up.
Yeah, so I want to say that I think if this is where I'll go here, because Jessica's book, which I highly recommend, and I don't know if you can see me holding it up here. This is me holding up Jessica's book and endorsing it, everybody.
It's not meant to be a strong book plug here.
Yeah,
I think most of the people joining are aware of it. So
okay. But this is the very last page of Reimagining Workplace Wellbeing. And there's this quote: "A robust evidence base exists to guide us on how to create a workplace culture that supports a more holistic approach. It requires a strategic, systemic approach rather than a loose set of unaligned programmatic tactics." So, Philip, I want to say, people who are exposed to unaligned programmatic tactics are going to get fed up with wellness, right? In addition, it mobilizes teams to support one another's growth and well-being. And that's what this is all about. So when I saw Jessica's work, which is a lot about transcendence and spirituality, the whole idea is this: we're all in this together. And all of those modules that I talked about earlier align with a lot of the things that Jessica writes about, right? Employees are guided to think about the greater good of work, collaboration, relationship-driven, multi-level connection and belonging. So I'll turn it back to Jessica and ask her to comment on how here's a concrete programmatic, if you will, or approach, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of embodies some of these core ideas. And I'm curious what you think about that, Jessica.
Yeah, when I wrote the book, it wasn't intended to give a recipe for a more effective approach to well-being. What it was intended to do is to take a evidence base that I believe the workplace well-being field has overlooked for a long time, including, Joel, quite a bit of work you've been doing, I believe, that integrates it into what we already know works in well-being, which, hello, culture, it's about, do we have the policies? Do we have the environment? Do we have the leadership support? Are communications aligned? And the book provides a lot of particular ways to go about that. What excites me so much is that when I was reviewing the literature, there were so few really high quality evaluations of interventions that took these concepts and brought them in a really comprehensive, thoughtful way. And so I hope this doesn't make you blush, Joel, but I was just so excited to see here is an exemplary program with an exemplary evaluation design wrapped around it. And so when employers come to me and say, well, you've given us a lot of strategies, Jess, now what do I do? I've been looking for who's got an evidence-based approach and has evaluated and measured it that actually takes some of these concepts and brings it in. And Joel, you've been doing this work for quite a long time. You've been at the periphery of my attention. So I've known about you, but it was really my strong pivot into this work that allowed us to dig in together. And so for those of you who are joining us, Joel and I have had 3 or 4 conversations now. We've had so much fun geeking out together about the commonalities and our interest in these areas. But that's what made me so excited about this work is, here we have a tested solution that you can now take and adapt to what you're doing, adapt this work, adapt these approaches, and affect change in your part of the world.
I'm not going to blush. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Julie and Jennifer, who have worked with me to adapt it, and ask you guys, do you want to share your
deflection, isn't it, Joel?
No.
I did make you uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, wait a second, because it's not about me. That's the truth is this work has been used by a lot of people. And so since I have people here and other people who are new, I thought maybe they can share. I mean, I don't know what they're going to say, but they have experience delivering the program and adapted version of it. So I thought if you wanted to share anything in the last few minutes we have, that would be I thought, Jessica, if that's okay, they're here. Yeah. And I don't know they were going to be here. I didn't pay them to come.
Yeah, we want to hear what it's like in the trenches. Please share.
Well, I'm happy to share, and then I'll give, I'll let Jen share too. So we live in 2 different parts of upstate New York, which is very smoky, by the way, right now. Mm-hmm. Very, very smoky. And we've been working with Joel through some funding from the strategic, state opioid response grant, as well as on my end, the Appalachian Regional Commission. We've had the opportunity to really work on this. We started on this with capacity building, which makes this as an approach rather than a program. And by doing the capacity building and talking to business leaders, talking to people who are employees, talking to people across the state and finding out what it is they need and where are they struggling, what keeps them up at night, not necessarily geeking out and being a nerd by waking up in the middle of the night thinking about research, but by what keeps them up at night about their employees. What are they concerned about? Because these people all care about their employees. We found that. They tell us that. And through all of that work, Joel was able to take this well-proven strategy and a set of tools, not one thing, a set of tools that we can offer to businesses and talk to businesses about, go into businesses, build relationships, stick with them through the process. And every single one of them are about moving past that mind your own business world that we live in and moving toward how can I help and how can I walk beside you through this world? And that's a very different way than going in and doing 10 modules of one program and going, poof, you've been given an evidence-based program, now go and live your life. Jen?
Absolutely. It has been a pleasure to watch this unfold, both gathering the support that we did from a variety of leaders throughout the region in upstate New York, both Finger Lakes and Central region, a variety of perspectives, yet those perspectives were remarkably similar, pointing out similar thoughts, similar statistics. They inform the development of the ripple effect of well-being, which was a brand new adapted for our area for this New York project, which really culminates pieces of things that Joel has been offering to the community for years. That's what I love about it, is the adaptiveness. And as Julie was saying, it does include a component of engagement, small business discussions. If we don't already know the business, I find those more helpful when you're totally unaware of the particular business and their weaknesses and strengths. Many of those that we're going into are colleagues that we work with already, so we kind of have a sense and we can jump right into the ripple and hopeful. And we offer 2 other modules, as well as Julie said, sticking with them, because our objective really is councils, and we're both councils of addictions in 2 parts of the state, is to be able to continue to do this work and also add to it the addiction work that will not only impact the business, the employee, but eventually down the road, that employee's family. So it's really evolving, or could evolve to a very good place.
Thanks everyone for joining. It's fun conversation, Joel, and I just appreciate the chance to be here and for our friends to meet each other. How fun.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Thanks so much.